Welcome back, guys. So, moving on from where we left off, I have taken the time to prime all the major parts of the Abrams, and that's just purely because I want to try and speed on with the build. Been a little ill this last week or so, so I haven't had a chance to do much modelling. I'm conscious that time is ticking on and we want to get this build over the finish line. So, off camera, I've primed everything, and two colours I've used rubber black and XF13 JA green, so Japanese Air Force green. So rubber black for the wheels and the stowage, and then the green for the main parts of the tank. I'll fall over. So that's been pretty successful. So what we're going to do first is we're going to paint the wheels. So if we move the actual bulk of the tank out of the way, set that to one side, and we can look at the wheels here. And what we're needing to paint these fellas with is a circle template, one of these. And you can see by the state of mine's quite old, and I've painted a lot of tanks' wheels with this. So the thing we need to do is just grab any wheel. They're all the same size, and we want to figure out which size is the correct size for the wheel rim itself. So we're looking at that size there. I think that's just a little too tight. That is a perfect fit. There we go. So what we need to do is mask off these areas here so we get no overspray on the tyres. And the reason I painted this rubber black is that's the colour of the wheel, the tyre section of the wheel, and the interior of the wheel is going to be desert sand, although I'm actually tempted just to paint one or two a light NATO green, just to make it look like they have been replaced. And I've got a plan for the fenders on the tank. So these parts here, I'm going to replace this on this side here, and then with the side skirt for that side, which I think is this one. And what we're going to do is we're going to have this one here, NATO green and black camouflage, as a replacement part, and we'll put some scorching on this part here as if it's been damaged by some unknown means and it's been replaced. So the front two road wheels, then we can paint green as well, and it'll look like it's had some sort of workshop repair. So bearing in mind the front road wheels for the idlers are, you can just see there is a shoulder on that one, whereas a normal road wheel, they are shoulderless. So we need to be careful that we paint that one correctly. Now on the real vehicle, the center hubs are actually clear, so you can see the oil level. Something to think of if you really want to go ultra detail on it. To be honest with you, if we do a bit of weathering, you're not going to see that anyway, but in the rear vehicle they are. So let me just grab some masking tape. We'll blank off the holes around the one we want to use, and then we'll come back and we'll get ready to spray. So see you back in a moment. Okay, so we're back, and we've got the tape around the aperture, and we've got some custom mix of US Desert Sand in the airbrush. So all we do is we can actually do it, I usually tend to do it this way first, is we just want to put a coating on the inside of the wheel. And you just come in 90 degrees and just spray away. There we go. Now you can see that the template is slightly overscale for the wheel. It doesn't matter too much. In reality, when these things are sprayed, they don't mask the wheels off, and you do get a little overspray on the tyres. Sometimes you just get a full overspray on them, so not worried too much. And if you just take your time to make sure it's fairly well centered, then the overspray will be quite minimal. So once we sprayed the back of the wheel, we want to come in and spray the front, and it is just very nice dusting around the rim. Focus on the center hub. And that's it. Perfectly painted wheel. Now if we're not happy with the if we're not happy with the centering, what we can do is we can just come back in. We'll try the other one and we'll just see how that is. Alright, so what's that? That is an ordinary road wheel. There's a front. We're going to keep a front wheel and a road wheel to the side. We're going to paint them NATO green. So we'll come in with the next one and we'll just try that and see how that fits. It is just marginally too big. The beauty with this thing and acrylic paints is you can actually come in and just scrape away the spray that's left on it from before, and it'll do no harm whatsoever. It might be that it's just an accumulation of paint that's narrowed the hole down a little. It's just too small. So we're going to go with my original choice and just be slightly oversprayed. It'll be okay. So just pop the road wheel in. Get it centered. And then spray away. And if you're buying a model, say from Meng or someone, for example, they tend to have a correct size wheel mask in the kit, like a photo etch, piece of photo etch brass with the correct size circle in it for doing this very job. But it's the quickest and easiest way of spraying your road wheels. We've also got the dry sprockets. And the beauty of spraying these a dark grey or a rubber black or even a matte black to start with is it helps you get forced shadow. And when I say forced shadow, I mean because you spray roughly perpendicular to the horizontal surface, then all the recesses around bolts and that already stand out, and that's before even having a wash in place. So it just helps with that instant detail. So if I focus in a bit, you'll see a bit better. There we go. So painting this, then just gently paint around the rim. You see that colour build up. Now focus in the centre, so we've got a nice bright centre, catches your eye, and then you've got this natural shadow building up on the inside of the rim with a bright exterior. And being on the sticks, you can turn it in your hands. That's the quickest and easiest way to paint a part. Now bearing in mind that these outer teeth, tooth parts here, they're actually bolting onto the wheel rim itself, or basically is a rim. So that's what these bolt marks are for. So if you wanted to, you could actually paint that bit NATO green to indicate a replaced tooth guide. But we're just going to go for sand on my one. Now, the other thing to think of when we're thinking of kit parts, I'll just show you this, is we're looking at zenithal highlights. Now these are the stowage items, so they're just rucksacks. And when I say zenithal highlights, I'm just meaning think about where the sun's coming down. And this is why you paint these a dark black colour or a dark grey colour. because they're going to be lying or stacked up on the side. So the tops will all be lighter than the sides, because that's where the sun's going. So if you just spray down from the top, just gently, you don't want to flood it with colour. All we want to do is just pick out the highlights, and the spray will naturally find those highlights or the lifted edges, and it will stick to them, and then it will leave the recessed edges in shadow. So we're just spraying across the surface, 90 degrees. Remembering about the sides, so we spray vertically down the sides as well. And then when you look at it, so you can see that natural shadow. Now what you can do is just put a hint of colour underneath, and that started that paint job. Now what I'm going to come back and do is we'll do the zenithal highlight on all the kit like this. I'm actually going to come back in with deck tan, which is a really white cream colour, and I'm going to dry brush all over these parts with deck tan, and then we're going to come in with a thin olive drab colour, almost like a wash, which will then colour in the shadow recess areas darker than it will the highlighted areas, and you'll get that instant worn look. And then when it's dried, we can come back in and we can apply more dry brushing if needed, some detail painting. But the main thing when you're doing this is to put very light dusty coats on, and just think where the sun's going to be coming from. It's that zenithal highlight. And obviously move the part around so you're getting it accurately painted. There we go. That's those parts all. Second coat, highlight coat. So that's what we're going to do with them. So I'm going to get on now, and I'm going to spray the rest of the wheels up, and I'll do the first highlight coat on the stores, and then we'll come back once we get the airbrush cleaned out, and we'll actually look at doing some pre-shading on the main tank parts. So we'll see you in a minute. Okay, so I'll just pull you out of it. There we go. So you can see there we have got the bulk of the wheels painted, and we've got that first sort of shadow coat on all the stores. Now we've got 3 wheels here left over, so we've got a spare wheel and the 2 wheels we want to paint NATO green. We've got some paint left in the colour cup, so I thought what actually we need to do is get some paint on the side of the tank. And this is something we need to remember, or like to remember, or point out to focus. With a tank like the Abrams, or any modern main battle tank that's got side skirts on, you actually don't see very much of the side. But it doesn't mean you don't paint it. And the thing that I like to sort of remind folk is that it's a really good practice ground to practice techniques, shading, streaking, whatever, with your airbrush. And when I mean that is you can come in and practice painting that top edge and feathering that paint down, so you get that area where you've got the bright highlight and then it's fading down. And then you can come in and you can do streaks. So you start at the top like that. So you're streaking down and you're feathering down. So basically all you're doing is focusing one point, and then you flick the airbrush up. And as you flick the airbrush up, the paint obviously goes down, and you end up with that streak. And if you want to strengthen up the top, you just come back into the top and just lay that highlight back in there to get that defined edge, and then you can just come down. It's just a little bobbly action, so you're just flicking the airbrush up and down, focus on the edge, and it will feather in the start of the paint streak, and then you end up with something like that. Now that's a finish, a technique that I've used for years on armor models, and it just augments the weathering process. It puts that different subtle tonal finish in to the paint finish, and that's even before you get any other oil weathering or anything going on. And depending on how much paint you put down will depend on how much of that finish comes through to the final finish. Now this is the sort of stuff I'll be focusing on the outside armor. We're building this natural streaking in the painting, but because this is covered up, it's a really good place to start practice. It's good for your airbrush control because you get used to knowing where the paint's going to be delivered, and you can focus that paint on specific parts. So we'll look at where the torsion bars join the wheel suspension arm, and we'll just colour them in. Now these bits won't be seen much, but they'll be there. And this is about creating a little depth to the finish that when people are looking at it, their eyes will naturally pick out these different tonal finishes, the different colours. And when we put a wash on here, which we will do before we join the top and bottom together, it'll really make it pop. So at the front of the tank, if you get that all done, now you can see that layer work's coming up, and we're not using very much paint at all. We've got natural shadows in there, and that's all from feathering the paint. Very, very fine layers of paint. And if you want to blend it, you just pull back a little bit and blend that in. It's taken no paint at all to cover that. Paint the final drive, and notice I'm coming from the top down. Because all the shadows are going to be naturally on the lower side of these arms where they're closest to the ground. And there we go, that's that side, and just about nearly painted. Just strengthen up that top edge there. And then what we need to do is we need to think about coming along this bottom edge here. Bearing in mind this will be seen, so we can come in strong here, and we can do it. Think about this way, so the sun will be coming down this way, so we want to start along that edge there. We've got those panels there, we can colour them in. This is all freehand airbrushing, and this is what speeds up your builds, is if you can learn to control your airbrush freehand to get the finish you're looking for. It saves hours on masking. Now you see that there, we've got that streak, natural streaking coming in. Trying to keep it random. One or two of the streaks don't go all the way down to the end of the panel. We want that join there to be a highlight. So trigger control is everything here, and then we can come back and just gently layer in a. There we go. You naturally want that shadow underneath the engine cowlings. And those louvers we want to get from the top, so we want bright paint here because that is in direct sunlight. So we get that paint in there very, very bright. All those big flat surfaces. Tops of the lights. Tops of the recovery eyes. And then just spray down the front of those louvers. You don't want to get in the bottom of them, you just want to spray the tops. So when you look at it, you've instantly got that. Look down on it. It's nice bright sandy colours. You look at the front of it. Oh look, there's lots of shadow. This middle one is an exhaust, so we're going to have to paint that with a hull red or something maybe, and weather it up. But if we get this bright sandy colour on the front edge of these louvers, that'll help us to get that sort of hot rusty metal look. So just in from the top, focus on that top edge and then flick down. It'll naturally catch all the high detail and put in a natural shadow. And this is how we want the airbrush to work for us. And then just to get a hint of paint underneath, we can just come in, just a hint of colour. Don't put it in too heavy. You just want to put that impression that it is being painted, but it's in shadow. There we go. So we've now got a streaky, weathered look already, and that's just with the first layer of paint. Right. We need to come in here and we just want to bobble along the bottom here and blend that bottom edge in. I'm not going to paint the front glasses until we've got it joined together, because we might have a seam to deal with here, so we'll just not bother painting that, and then we'll paint that when we paint the top and blend it in. But we can just come in here. In reality, you're not going to see much of this along the front or the bottom. We need to paint the backs of the wheels there. Need to paint the return rollers. And we put a wash on this, which we will do shortly. This will all pop. But that's that side painted. We've got the rear painted. I just need to paint the other side, and then we can think about we've got the green obviously on these wheels, but we can think about getting the tracks painted, and we'll get this lot washed ready for assembly, so we can then join the top and the hull together. So be back shortly. Okay, so we're back, and we've got that side sprayed, and we've got that side sprayed, and managed to drop it. Excellent, well done you. And I thought what I'd do is show you the difference between spraying on green and spraying on a sand colour. So if we look here, so we'll highlight here where this recess on the hull is. So nice bobbly little paint finish in there. Very light. In here. Fill in the corners. There we go. You see just how you can get that 3D effect just by laying paint in certain areas and leaving others, creating that natural highlight. Fill it in. Don't even need to go full wholesale solid colour. We've got those hints of colours there that build that picture up for us. Now remember, none of this is going to be seen, so it's no big deal, but it's nice just to use it as a practice area to hone those skills. So that's painting over green. Let's go and paint over sand colour. So the inside's not been touched, so we'll pick this piece here. Well, first of all, you can hardly see where the paint's going because it's such a close match. So lay that paint down there. Now very, very difficult to get that tonal variation because there isn't the contrast there naturally. So you can see there where we've had to use quite a bit of paint to cover that small piece. Yet we come on the bottom and we haven't used hardly any paint because we've got that natural contrast. We can focus the paint in areas we want to make look more prominent. You know, like joins, bends, changes in metal direction, and then generally just dust in over the rest of it. Get that impression of paint. If you want to get something that's standing out a bit more, you just come in and you just get that paint in there, build up that highlight. And that naturally will look brighter because it's brighter than the dark base we started with. So that is definitely the lower hull done. I am going to paint these wheels and then we'll come back and we'll actually get all the wheels on. No, we're not. We'll get a wash just thrown on this quickly and then we'll get the wheels dry brushed because we want to dry brush the rubber just to highlight some of the chips and nicks we put in it, and then we can actually get the lower hull finished off, get the tracks on, get them painted, bring it all together. So back shortly. Welcome back. So paints have dried. I've done a little bit of work just like I said I would. So we've got here the shading work done, ready for the green top coat on all the stowage. Some of it I'm going to give just a wash on, I think, more as anything else. I quite like that sort of sandy colour looking tarp, so we'll just do a wash and paint the straps. And I've also gone over and painted the wheels, well, dry brushed the rubber black with a bit of grey just to help define some of the chunks and stuff that were taken out. And I have completed one side of the hull with its characteristic sort of dirty streaking work, and that is a simple mixture of Citadel's Agrax Earthshade. I did try sepia, but it was too orangey. I wanted something a bit more grimy, so sorry, that's sepia I've got. It's Agrax Earthshade is what I plumped for because it's a bit browner, and that kind of highlights the bolt pattern just as I wanted to. So how did I do that, I ask you say? So we start from this, which is just how we left off with the paint, and we've ended up with this nice grimy finish, of which you're going to see the sum total of very little. So I've got some water just in a Tamiya paint jar and a number 10 Graduate Daler & Rowley flat shader. So first things first, we need to just paint water over this. Now you can, these Citadel washes are designed just to go straight on. However, I find they're quite strong, and putting the water down helps to dilute them a little, makes them go a little further, but what it also does is it just tones it down a little bit because you don't need as much. So it's very similar to oil shading when you just gently moisten the surface of the model you're doing, and then you come back in with your oil work. We're just coming back in with this acrylic based shader. I know this is the old formula. They have changed it over the last sort of 24 months. I think the new formula behaves pretty much the same way, but it's a really good, quick, easy, down and dirty way of getting shade on your tank, getting sort of streaking in there, and just to get that hull finished to the point that when you button up with all the armor plates on the side, the bits you do see look nice and grimy. Other things I would do is maybe pigment work for a desert type vehicle, and that might happen when I do the overall weathering for the combination of the tank and the transporter unit. So you just come in, just paint it in and let it do its thing. And the main thing with this stuff is don't let it pool, because if it pools you'll end up with staining, and that you don't want. What you want is all the bolt details to be highlighted, and you want that impression of gravity taking effect on dirt. You also want to come in here and just wipe along there, just to blend that into the whole bottom. Now, this is where you turn the brush onto its side maybe, and just drag little bits. And that's it. That is the quickest and easiest way you can shade a tank hull. You can do the same if you didn't have Citadel shades. You can use enamel washes, you can use oil washes. I'm just using these acrylic washes because they dry really quickly and we want to get on with this build. It also acts as a little bit of a filter, tones down the paint finish, and if you want you can always come back in if it was not dark enough or you want to just add a few more bits of streaks. You can just come back in once it is dry and just brush it in. This isn't a one-trick pony. You can do it as many times as you like until you get the finish you like, and that's the most important thing about this, is the finish that you like. It's your model. Be careful you don't put your finger in it because you will leave fingerprints. So just, usually I'll be wearing gloves at this point, obviously I'm not. So that's that, and then the other thing I've done is I've just come in, just taken a small amount and just worked it into the wheel. This stuff does thin with water, so if you wanted you can put a little bit of water down, dip into the pot and mix it together to just make it a little bit finer, and then just come and brush that in. A little bit goes a long way, so you might want to get a few wheels. You can brush that into the second wheel and then just come and wick away the excess in the first one. All we want to do is highlight the bolt detail and make that wheel look a bit more used. So you can see just how far this goes once you water it down a little bit. So we're just conscious we don't want to have this one still quite heavy here. You can always go and dry the brush off on a piece of kitchen towel and then come back in and wick away the excess. You want to finish roughly like that, so it's highlighting the bolt pattern, make the wheel look a little grimy. You know, just getting that contrast is what we're looking for. We always talk about the contrast to really bring the detail out. That's all we're doing. So you just taking some on your brush and then just brushing it in and working it around the seam. Make sure you do the outside of the rim as well. And this will get us to the point now, once this all dries in the next 20 minutes, because it literally will dry that quickly, is we'll be able to look at getting the tracks on. And then we'll need to think about detailing the tracks to make sure they actually look like steel tracks rather as rubber vinyl. That's what they are at the moment. But that'll be the next job once the wheels are on and we're ready to go and put the tracks on. So I will just take 10-15 minutes to finish detailing up these wheels. We'll check the work we've done on the hull, and then we'll come back and actually look at getting the tracks on this beast and think about getting the hulls joined together, and we're pushing on really, really well. So see you again in a moment. Alright, so we're back. And there we have it. There is a nicely weathered, grimed up hull. Slightly different shades either side. One side's dirtier than the other, is what it is. Right, so the next job is to get all the wheels back on, and then we can have a look at the tracks. So I will just pop them on, just remembering that these shouldered wheels here go in the idler wheel position, right at the front of the tank. And then working back the way they all pop on, just like so. So you will be able to see a little bit of the detail as we go along. Certainly they look really nice and grimy, which is what we want. Remembering this vehicle has been in theatre, has been in the thick of it. We want it looking dirty. I think you can see the chunks we've taken out the tyres. Really looking good. One thing to remember though is make sure you've got an even spread of tyres that have been beaten up a bit on both sides, so they're not all on one side. So there's our running gear, and that there, you can see the difference, how that stands out. That is the other side front idler. So it just proves there's no way we can get those muddled up, which is nice. Just grab another wheel. And it's really good when you get to this stage, because it's now a case of starting construction proper. So there we go. There's our running gear all on. We'll get this side done. This side's all got sand coloured wheels. And the dry brushing we did, the grey dry brushing we did on the tyres, stands out really nicely even after the shading work with the Agrax Earth Shade. It just highlights those chunks and bites into the rubber that happen in the normal wear and tear of a track vehicle as they chew up the highway. And then your stand falls over because it's completely overbalanced to one side. Right. So, there we go. We've got our hull all ready to go for tracks. So let's grab the tracks and have a look and see what like they are. And here they are. So they are rubber. So there's a number of different ways we can approach this. We can get them on, and to get them on we'll take off the sprocket, slope them around the idler wheel and the road wheels. In fact, what we can do is just pop off the idler wheel, pop the sprocket in. Make sure the teeth engage into the correct sections. And then the sprocket goes onto its shaft. And the idler wheel, you just grip either side. Being mindful where the join is, it's here. And gently tease them out. There is a bit of give because they're a softer vinyl. Just line them up and push it home. Make sure the guide horn's sitting with all the wheels, and that's it, the tracks are on. So, same on this side. Just find the join, which is where? There's the joint. So we can pop that one in there. So locate that there. Again, we'll just pop off the idler. Gives us the flex we need to pop on the drive sprocket. And then just pinch in the idler and the tracks. Make sure the guide horns are in the road wheels. And then just gently stretch it over, place it home. That's the tracks on. Right. So now we've got to think of how do we get the rust detail on these tracks. So to my memory, well, these are obviously going to be rubber black anyway, because they're rubber pads for the road wheels or for the road tracks. And then on the inside, they're also run on rubber. So realistically, the only bits that we're going to need to do anything with are the outside joints here, the middle strip here, and the inside bit here, and then the guide horns. Now there's enough flex on these tracks that we can actually do this with them in place. So it's about making conscious decisions times now. How much work do we want to create for ourselves? I don't particularly want to do the top run of the tracks because you're not going to see it. If we get the hull and pop the hull on, so I just squeeze him in place. Right, and let's get the side panel and offer it up. So that fits in there like so. So all we're going to see is basically from here on the lower run of the tracks and then up around the drive sprocket. So I'm quite content I can do that after. I really want to push on with this. So what we need to do is think about actually joining this whole top to the back, because you can see there's a little bit of flex there, so we're going to have to do some pulling in to close that gap up. So that's something we need to do. And then obviously we need to glue the front and see what like this front join is. We're going to have to prime this again anyway, and we might need to do a bit of touching in here. And you can see how fragile the paint is, it's just been scraped off, so obviously I need to make sure we've got a bit of tissue down to stop it scrubbing off. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go and get this top fixed in place, and then we're in a position where we can really push on and start painting proper. So I think we need just to flex that in a bit, just gently flex it in. And we need to check the rear, make sure there's no obstructions, which I don't think there is. So we're going to think what glues we're going to use here. Yeah, see, with bending that in, we've got a nearly perfect joint. It's just perfect, right. So we just need to clean off that back edge there. Again, we can come in with just a hard, and this is a very hard sanding stick, and on the fine side, and just brush that. And the only reason we're doing this is just so we're clearing the paint off the gluing surface to give us a good strong bond. Now this hook and fasten method of Tamiya jointing comes from the days when they had running gear in these things, and you had to get the top off to service it. But we don't have any running gear on this, so we don't need to get the top off. So that just needs, it's a permanent joint we need to get in place. And then obviously it's going to fit nicely with those two rubber grommets. We can put a drop of super glue in there. But what we need, I'll move those out of the way for a moment. What we need is some Revell contactor, which is in here at the back somewhere. Seem to have lost it. Just get my covers off my trailer unit so we don't get any paint on it. I can find it in the back there. Yeah, just put a bit of kitchen towel over the completed N1070 and the M1000 trailer unit, just to avoid getting any overspray paint. Right, so move those out of the way, put that there. So there's a good long shelf here. You can come in here and we can apply a very good piece of glue, and then if we just come in on the back side here and here, right, and what we can also do is we can glue along the front here. Hopefully it's in frame, if not I'll show you in just a second. So we're just gluing along the front here and up the sides here. So I think that touches the underside hull. And then we'll just put some glue in there, because that it'll bond to the pegs. They're only guide pegs anyway. So here we go for nothing. Lock that in place, center it up. That's it. And then push that home. Nice. What we're going to do is get some extra thin and some tape, I think, and we'll tape this back piece up just so we get a good strong joint. So Tamiya extra thin. So we'll run that along the front there. Get some tape, then we'll tape. So hold it in place. There we go. Only need a couple of pieces, just to give ourselves a good chance of getting a nice tight joint. Don't worry if any of the glue has squeezed out. We'll give it a light sanding. So same again here, and it predominantly needs to be on this side here. So just hold the tape in and then pull it in like that. Yeah, it's probably could have been a better joint, I'll be honest with that. Probably could have been a better joint from Tamiya, but let's remember this is an older kit. So, again, we'll go back to it, it is what it is. Now another way we can reinforce this joint, if we wanted, we could have gone in there and put in a bit of super glue, if we can get a nozzle in there. And just hold it. Yeah, we can actually, I think. So just a drop of super glue in there, wick it in the joint, and then just push and hold that joint shut. But make sure it is in the right place and it's level. Hold it for 30 to 40 seconds and it will set up. and that will close that gap up. And if needed, we can wick in a little bit of super glue after, just to do any filling. Vital bond, maybe give it a little skeet. There we go, just on the underside, just to flash that glue off. And then we can come in and touch in before with the Japanese navy green before we start the painting process for the rest of it. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to leave that dry for half an hour or so, and then we will come back and start pressing on big time, because we're on the proper full-on vehicle paint job, and this thing will start coming together. So see you again shortly.